A huge welcome to the IoD revamped wine bar. If you haven't managed to check it out, do come along and check it out. It is a fantastic space and they've got an amazing tapas menu. Also, if you're into Harry Potter, it's got a bit of a Harry Potter vibe to it as well. So we'll start this bite with a very fond farewell to Chloe Douglas, who's been our community manager for the last 18 months, has done an amazing job. She's hosted events, she's pulled together the monthly newsletter, she's even live tweeted from the back of a moped from us. She is off to set up a event space and a farmers market. We wish her massive good luck. We know you're going to absolutely smash it, Douglas. You'll be amazing. Do keep in touch and remain a member of the 99. Now we move on to, it's been an interesting week for the 99 with some interesting meetings, including meeting the general manager of Evernote, who was telling us about the doubling of data. Currently, every 14 months, we double data. By 2020, it will be less than every month, which is absolutely amazing. Quite scary, but absolutely amazing. Also a huge opportunity for startups out there if we can mine that data effectively and create business and commercial opportunities off the back of it. We're also going to be doing an exciting initiative around the IoD's Pride in Business program, which is an initiative to support LGBTQ+ individuals within business to sort of champion that area, but also to look at the fairly scary stats where 80% of students who come out while they're in university go back into the closet when they go into the world of business, which is quite frankly absolutely appalling, and we need to change attitudes in that area, including meeting the owner and CEO of Gay Times UK, which is the world's largest gay publication, where they have subscribers in 81 countries across the globe, which is quite staggering. And hopefully we're going to get him in to talk about a turnaround of a established print media organisation into the sort of digital world, which in the last 18 months has resulted in them getting 1.5 million digital subscribers across Facebook, Twitter, etc. So it's been an exciting week, and we're hopefully going to get him in to talk about that turnaround to 99ers. As always, I'm joined by the Head of External Affairs, Jamie, who is going to give us an insight into some of the policy goings on and press goings on, and by an awesome 99er who has been with us for knocking on to 3 years now as part of her scale-up journey. Hopefully she's got something out of the 99, and that's why she's renewed. But we'll get an insight from Naomi on her business, what she's up to, and also what she's got out of the 99. But without further ado, Jamie, what's been going on this week?
Thanks very much, Alex. I think, guys, the first thing to say is that there's been a lot of media buzz around 2 reports that the IoD's put out recently, which are very, very relevant to startups. The first is our report around the gig economy and looking at how important self-employed workers and ad hoc workers and contract work is for startups when people are going through the kind of first stages of their business. The other report that we had out and was released last week is the report on older entrepreneurship, which I actually talked about in the last bite, which has had a significant amount of pickup across various media outlets. As ever, anyone wants to talk about either of those 2 reports or anything else that the IoD is putting out in terms of policy work, then please do give me a buzz, and I'm always available. Now, on the political front this week, we're seeing MPs today actually go off back on recess after just 9 days of being back after their summer holidays. This isn't just them thinking, you know, let's just give up, it's all too complicated with Brexit and whatever else. It's actually they're heading off on what is basically political carnival season, and it's basically 3 weeks of party conferences, party leaders and various kind of dignitaries across all the main political parties go and play to their various bases, make sure they're coming up with eye-catching policy announcements that they can then get back into the kind of parliamentary agenda in the autumn and feel like they've got some momentum behind them. This is something the IoD will be across Labour and Tory conferences, in particular making sure that we're getting the word out in terms of our policy priorities, not least around Brexit and transition arrangements within that, but also what can we achieve in terms of big domestic reforms at a time when Brexit is crowding out the parliamentary agenda to some extent, as well as the public debate. And also when the parliamentary arithmetic makes it actually quite difficult to push through some of these reforms as well. So we will be talking about that. Another thing to watch out for is that on the 22nd, the Prime Minister will be making another one of her big interventions, big speeches around Brexit, and particularly, we think, on what transition arrangements are actually going to look like for businesses so that we don't avoid this cliff edge scenario in March 2019. Now, the Prime Minister has a track record of making very, very successful, I suppose, in political terms, interventions with these big set pieces, so it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that. Now, on the startup front this week, I think one thing that has been quite interesting is we're looking at Natwest's Startup Monitor, which is showing that actually about a year ago, 39% of young people in the UK were saying that they would consider starting or founding a business. That's down to 14% this year. So there's been a massive loss in confidence among young people who are thinking about starting businesses. Although young people are still the most likely people to want to found businesses, there's a massive drop in confidence, in particular over issues like access to finance and access to skills. Now, there's a lot of talk around the kind of uncertain political environment and uncertain regulatory environment. Some of this may come down to that, but it'd be interesting to see if that's an experience as well that's feeding through to 99ers. So if you do have something you'd like to feed back on that, then please do, as ever, get in touch with us. That's basically what's going on this week, Alex.
Fantastic, Jamie. Now, you mentioned it's a carnival atmosphere in
Yeah.
the politics. So if you've been to Rio or Notting Hill, it isn't quite that sort of carnival.
No.
But the
Absolutely
conferences do have a key role to play, don't they? Even in today's world, it does bring people together. There is an opportunity to lobby, get thoughts across.
Certainly, and from our point of view, I mean, the IoD has a very, very good and constant engagement with government because we represent such a broad swathe of the business community and have such a powerful voice within the business community anyway. A lot of the time, these conferences are an opportunity for people to basically get the word out if they find it very difficult to sort of broadcast their views other times in the year. But in general terms, it's very, very useful to be up there. Politicians all gathered in one place thinking about what their platforms are going to be over the next year. It's very, very useful for us to be there. You're right, though. It's not quite a kind of Rio atmosphere, certainly.
But within the Westminster bubble, it's their equivalent of Rio or Notting Hill. Or
I know, it's depressing, yeah.
Poor
and
things.
the stats that have come out from Natwest, obviously slightly concerning on that side of where people are coming from. It's difficult to turn around and say, what has caused this? Is it the environment we're in or anything like that? But is it a case of just people are thinking more about the career they're going to? They're looking at more sort of stable career options and things like this going forward?
I think it's probably too early to tell. There are any number of reasons why people might be thinking that taking risks nowadays or taking risks at the moment is not something that they want to necessarily get on board with. I mean, apart from anything else, the regulatory environment, the political uncertainty surrounding Brexit is at the front of everyone's mind. But we're also seeing, for instance, inflation still sitting above real wages growth. And so people are beginning to feel the pinch in their pocket at this point. And you can imagine that probably has feeds down or kind of trickles down into risk appetite as well. It's only been a year, obviously, and these things fluctuate. We might be in a completely different position next year, but it's just an interesting trend to see if it's being felt sort of more widely.
It'd be interesting to see what our student members feel as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
But Jamie, thank you very much for that. We'll pull you back in a second. But Naomi, a
Hello.
99er, 3 years, one of our very first. I think you're part of the pilot cohort as well.
I was, yeah.
Over to you.
Yeah, hello. So my name's Naomi Jane. It's great to be here. I am, one of the original members of the 99 when it first started out, and I run a positive change agency called A Life Less Ordinary Wanted. So we exist to empower leaders to build businesses and lives that they love, and our clients are a mix of entrepreneurs and also senior leaders in big business. And we support them through coaching, through tailored facilitation, leadership development programs, and therapy, because we're very passionate about supporting leaders with regards to their mental health. And this is crucial, actually, to being successful, is having really healthy mental health. I'm so glad it's getting spoken about more often. I am an entrepreneur who has depression and anxiety, and I successfully manage a business. We're a fully remote team, so we're very future work focused. Everybody's flexible. I'm the only full-time employed member of the company, employee, and then everybody else is on contract, whether it's retainers with my ops team or project-based contracts with my delivery team. I've got a team of associate coaches, facilitators, and therapists, and then an amazing head of ops who's basically my right-hand woman. And in terms of what I thought it'd be cool to chat about, and it's actually linked to what you mentioned, Jamie, was this thing around failure. And I think our attitude about failure is really, really important to explore as entrepreneurs, but also people who are considering entrepreneurship as a career path. And I think how failure gets treated, how it gets reported, how it gets, what we get taught about it in school, is that we avoid it, right? And the thing is, that doesn't work if you're an entrepreneur. You cannot avoid failure.
Yeah.
Like literally, entrepreneurship is basically, for me anyway, one failure after the other, because that's how you learn, like that's how you grow. And so it's a bit of a paradox that you go through this education system that tells you do not fail. Like do not fail at all. Like avoid it at all costs. It's embarrassing, shameful, you're going to upset your parents, like don't do it. And then you get out into the big bad world of work, and actually, if you want to do your own thing, if you want to create something from nothing, there is no way you are going to do that without failing somewhere, whether it's small or it's massive or it's monumental. You've got to be willing to take that risk. And I think that's what's tied up into what you were talking about this risk aversion that's coming through now, is we're seeing what happens when failure is reported in a certain way in the entrepreneurial world. Like we're all learning. You know, I was born pretty entrepreneurial. You know, I was selling buttons and badges in the playground at 6, but I wasn't born knowing exactly how to run a successful business. And as Alex knows, because we've known each other quite a long time, I set up my first business at university, and I ran that for 3.5 years. and that was a social enterprise, which was a youth engagement agency, and we failed phenomenally in 2011. And I didn't speak about it because it was embarrassed. You know, I'd had funding, I'd had supporters, I'd had partners, I had clients. We had a change in government, coalition came into power. I wasn't really very strategic at the time, and I was a bit naive, thinking that, you know, I didn't actually think about if the government was to change, what would happen to my business model. And of course, all of our clients died overnight because they will all eventually go up the food chain. They were funded by a government that was no longer in power. So I didn't talk about that because I was scared of how I was going to be perceived as someone who failed. And actually, I was asked to talk about it earlier this year at a night called, am I allowed to swear? No.
Go for it.
Fuck Up Nights. And so there's this, it's an international movement, and it encourages entrepreneurs to tell their failure stories in public and like air their dirty laundry, but actually it's a bit cathartic actually. And that's the first time I've ever spoken about my first business failing in public, and I speak a bit. That's 6 years on.
And I think it's quite interesting, you know, if you look at the US model where when you're over there and you're meeting groups of entrepreneurs, is that sort of failure is almost worn like a badge of honour. And in a lot of things, people don't respect you until you've been through a business failure. Because as Jamie and I've talked about, and we've talked about to numerous 99ers in the past, when something goes wrong and you've got that pit, that feeling in the pit of your tummy, that sort of thing that keeps you awake at night, and that sort of sick, nervous feeling, that's something that you're never going to forget. And the lesson you learn from that is absolutely key. And it always worries me where people turn around and go, well, I've never failed at anything, I've been a huge success. Well,
they're a liar.
If you haven't, then you've never got, they're either a liar, incredibly lucky, but it's quite worrying because they don't have that. They don't have that sort of, I don't think it's an appetite, but they don't have that nervousness about trying to make sure they get it right. And to sort of think, right, I don't want to go through that journey again. Because when I think one of my mentors told me, it's good to fail, just be very aware of people if they failed at exactly the same thing twice or 3 times in a row. Because then you're not learning from your lessons. But you're right, failure is key and people need to talk about it.
Well, failure is learning. You know, you're not failing right if you're not learning through it. So to that point, if you're making, it's Einstein who said, isn't it, you're going to get the same, you know, if you think you're going to get different results by doing the same thing over and over again, that's insanity. So we've got to be willing to try things differently and therefore we're going to fail. So I think it's about reframing failure and seeing it as an opportunity to learn. And it's trial and error. For me, that's exactly what, I've built this business 3.5 years in. You know, we've registered for VAT, we're finally doing international work, we've just started to get into a positive cash flow, had a horrific year financially last year. But I'm always failing, and I'm going to talk about it. And I'm going to encourage other people to talk about it because it's how we're going to grow, it's how we're going to build successful businesses. And I think it's also cultural, going back to the American thing, because I think that badge of honour, that sort of war scars mentality is like, I built a business and it flopped and look, I've got another one. It's like, I wish we were doing more of that. So it's about encouraging that conversation.
I think part of that comes down to networks in America, and the way the startup ecosystem and the kind of alumni networks work around places like Silicon Valley, which is that people are very, very tied into each other's enterprises to an extent. You kind of come out the end of one startup, whether you failed or whether you've been very successful, and you sold it up into another company. But you end up coming out and then putting yourself back into the ecosystem, regardless of whether you failed or started up, and you're valuable nonetheless. And that's where the UK seems to fail quite a lot, or come down the rankings quite a lot, is in terms of how sort of entrenched are our kind of startup networks, how supportive are these kind of peer-to-peer environments in the UK. 99 is obviously a fantastic example of one which is a really, really entrenched peer-to-peer network where people feel very genuinely supported by one another, but there aren't enough of them, and that's something that the US have always done very well, possibly because they've had a startup ecosystem sort of up and running for such a long time.
I also wonder if it's a London thing, because when I was out in Manchester recently, there is this attitude to be more open about your startup journey and open about your failings. And speaking to a number of 99ers there, they were quite blunt about, last year was a really tough year, or the first year of starting out was really difficult. Whereas in London, there is, we all go to a lot of startup events, and there is that sort of thing of, if you're not turning around and saying it's great, then you are definitely not in the norm in some of these events. You were at an event last night, and I'm sure there is that sort of constant sort of drink the Kool-Aid positive mentality thing, and that's good, but also being open and honest about the journey you've been on is a key part to that learning and a key part to your sort of development as an entrepreneur.
Definitely. I mean, I run a positive change agency, right? But I'm the first person on my Instagram story saying today has been a crap day, people, they happen. And also going back to that piece around support networks, like I've been a member of the 99 since the very beginning. Alex very kindly invited me along, and I'm still here because it is a supportive network. But it's also about, in Brixton, I'm based in South London, Impact Hub if you've got any business, got any kind of social interest, and we take the profits we make from our work and invest in supporting charities and social entrepreneurs with really discounted services. So that's our kind of for-profit social model. And so I'm a part of the Impact Hub network, and they are fantastic. And when I was having a really tough year last year, that was the community where I genuinely really did feel supported. I could go, I could cry in my co-working space and be around people who actually got that I was really going through a difficult time. But it's also thinking from as an entrepreneur, like, who is your support network? Like, I talk about this a lot. Like, I've got mentors coming out of my ears, like formal and informal. Yeah. I've got a coach that I pay and I invest in being coached. And you shouldn't be coached by anyone who's a coach who doesn't have one. That's a real personal gripe of mine. And I've got a therapist, you know, because I have a lot of stuff that I deal with on a day-to-day basis. I need to process that. But I have amazing people. You know, Alex is one of them, and I'm not just picking up because he's next to me. Thanks. Alex has been a massive supporter of mine through my first business, through this one, and it's those people who can support you and you're comfortable reaching out to and saying, do you know anyone who does this? Asking for help, I think, is also a big thing that's very deeply linked to failure. We're scared to ask for help. It's quite British, you know, so I'm fine, no, I'm all right, thanks. Ask, you know, you're never going to get anywhere, you know, and if you fail and you need help then, ask for help then. Like, it's okay, one, it's okay not to be okay, and two, it's always okay to ask for help. And I think that's why it's so key to be part of support networks, because then you've got access to people who maybe will be more open to helping you than outside in the big bad world. So I think they're key.
Naomi, that is absolutely fantastic and a really interesting insight. I think I was speaking to a 99er a couple of weeks ago who gave me the best advice in relation to looking for communities. Find a community you can be honest with.
Yeah.
And I think that is absolutely key. Be you an entrepreneur, be you in business, be you a business leader or anything else. Find a community you can be honest with and you don't feel as if you have to pretend you're something you're not. So on that note, it's a thoughtful note, but be positive. Have a great Friday. Have a fantastic weekend. A huge thanks from Jamie, Naomi and myself, and a massive good luck again to Chloe Douglas, who's leaving us. Have a great weekend.